Hello everyone. I welcome you all again in my session of manual testing. Today we are going to discuss about software development life cycle, which is also known as SDLC. So first of all we will see what is SDLC, and then we will proceed towards the types of SDLC, and we will see all its types in detail. So let us first understand what is software development life cycle. We have seen in our previous class about software, and we have also seen what is software testing. Now our focus is to understand what is software development life cycle. It means there is a software that we need to develop. Now, how this software is developed is basically the task of software development life cycle. Now, let us see the points which are listed here on the slide. SDLC software development life cycle is a process used by software industry to design, develop and test high quality softwares. The main aim is to produce a high quality software that meets customer expectations. Now, what things are required to develop a software? The main focus of SDLC is to focus on the development of a software. So, what are the types of SDLC that we have? We have 5 kinds of SDLC models, and these are listed here. First one is waterfall model, incremental model, spiral model, V model and agile model. We will first talk about waterfall model, and we will try to understand how a software is developed if we follow waterfall model. So we will see all its phases, and once all the phases are known to us, then we will see the pros and cons of waterfall model. So let us start with waterfall model. These are the 6 phases of waterfall model. In the first phase, we have requirement analysis. Here, we get requirement from client, and according to that requirement, we create a document and we understand about the project. Once the requirement is known to us, then a system design is created. In this system design, the focus is on the software and the hardware that is required for that particular software. Now, once the system design is done, then the implementation phase starts. Now here what happens, developer write code for a particular functionality. Once a code is ready, then developer performs unit testing at this phase. After the unit testing, another phase of water model starts, which is known as testing. Now here lies the work of testers, and testers perform their testing on the functionality and they verify whether the software is developed as per the requirement or not. Once the testing work is done and once a tester gives the green signal to the developer's work, then deployment phase comes. At this phase, product is handed over to the client, and project is live. After this deployment phase, there is maintenance. Now, suppose if anything we want to add in the project, or if we want to remove anything from it, so the total maintenance of the project takes place at this phase. So one by one, work is done in the phases, and overlapping of phases are not there. It is mandatory to finish first phase, only then one can start the second phase. So this is all about waterfall model. Here, whatever I have explained here in the diagram is written here in the slide. So we will just go through the points which are listed over here, and I believe that these points will be clear to you. So in the requirement gathering analysis, what happens? All possible requirements of the system to be developed are captured in this phase and documented in a requirement specification document. In system design, developer, testers, and all the teams, they decide that what are the hardware and what are the softwares that we will require for system design. Then implementation. In implementation, uh, there starts the work of the developer where they write the code. Then integration and testing is done, like small chunks are added, integrated, and then the task of testers start where they test the functionality. After that, deployment of the system is there where functional and non-functional testing is done, and product is deployed in the customer environment or released into the market. And then we have maintenance. So in maintenance, what happens? There are some issues which come up in the client environment. To fix those issues, patches are released. Also, to enhance the product, some better versions are released. Maintenance is done to deliver these changes in the customer environment. So these are the phases of waterfall model. Now, what is the advantage and disadvantage of waterfall model? So first of all, we will talk about the advantage of it. So waterfall model is very useful for small projects where functionalities are very less, project is of short duration, and where the requirement is also not very much changing. So there we can use waterfall approach. What is the disadvantage of this model? The disadvantage of this model is that if suppose our requirement is changing time to time, so this waterfall model will not be a good choice, because uh, in this waterfall model, once a requirement is given to us, the work starts in phases. So if suppose any requirement changes time to time, so one phase will not get completed properly. So this is the advantage and disadvantage of waterfall model. Now let us talk about another model that we have in SDLC. Its name is incremental or iterative model. So in this model, what happens? Different functionality of the software is divided into different builds. What is a build? Build is a kind of software, you can say, where we give some functionality, the software is developed according to that, and time to time different builds are there with different functionalities. So here in incremental model, what happens? The functionality is divided into different builds, and every build has to go through these phases. So it starts from design and development where no sorry it first starts with the requirement. After the requirement is given, these requirements are divided into multiple builds. Each build each build is having certain functionality. According to that functionality, design and development is done. Here developers write code for a particular functionality. Then it is given to the testers. Testers test it properly. And after the testing, implementation is there. Product is handed over to the customer. Similarly, build to other functionality is developed, tested, and go live. So this is the incremental approach. Let us understand this with another example. Suppose if I have a website of an e-commerce. In that website, I have a section of books, and another section that I have is home appliances. So what I'll do, I will take the requirement, and in that requirement, I have got an idea that this is an e-commerce site. So for build one, I will release all the features of the section that I have there in the site, and that section is, let us suppose if that is a book. So I will take all the functionality of the book and I will develop that. Then I will take another functionality that is home appliances and I will develop it, and that will be given in the build 2. So similarly, I will divide all my functionalities into multiple build, and then work will start where the first step will be developer will write the code, and then tester will test it, and then the product will go live. Now let us see the definition of incremental model. Incremental model is a process of software development where requirements are broken down into multiple standalone modules of software development cycle. Incremental development is done in steps from analysis, design, implementation, testing or verification, maintenance. Here is an example. First of all, one segment is developed, then another segment is developed, and so on. We have started adding one build into another build, and the process of in incremental model continues in this way. Now, let us focus on the advantages and disadvantages of incremental model. The software will be generated quickly during the software life cycle. This is the advantage of incremental model. Now, why the software will get generated early? Because software has only certain functionality. So that is why if one functionality will get developed, we will be able to release that, and we can give that to our customer. But disadvantage is what? It requires a good planning, designing. Suppose if our planning is not proper, if suppose we have not understood the requirement and we have started designing, so it can create a problem. Now again coming towards the advantage, let us see the advantage which is written here. It is flexible and less expensive to change requirements and scope. Why it is flexible? Because we have divided our requirements into small chunks. So it is less expensive. Now, what is the disadvantage? Problems might cause due to system architecture as such not all requirements collected up front for the entire software lifecycle. So the problem is related to the requirement. So for the first time, if we are not getting the complete requirement, so it can create problem once a software is developed. Again, coming towards the advantage, throughout the development stages, changes can be done. I mean, we can change anything at any phase. Then the disadvantage is what? Each iteration phase is rigid and does not overlap each other. So we have seen here that these are the phases that we have in incremental model. So we cannot overlap any of the phase which is a part of incremental model. So this is the disadvantage of incremental model. Again, let us talk about the advantage. This model is less costly compared to others. And disadvantage is rectifying a problem in one unit requires correction in all the units and consumes a lot of time. So it has a problem which is related to the time constraint. Otherwise, this model is very good, very effective, and we can uh, develop our software with incremental model approach. So we have seen waterfall model, we have seen incremental model, and now we will talk about a spiral model. This spiral model works in loop. The phases of a spiral model are planning, requirement and analysis, design, construction, testing, deployment and acceptance. So when this model is used, suppose if we have a project in which requirement is changing and requirement is not very much clear. So at that time we use a spiral model. So prototype is made. What is prototype? Prototype is a kind of software, or you can say it is a first model of something. So in a spiral model, when requirement is shared, so the work starts. At the end, a prototype is developed. And on the basis of that software or prototype, we analyze that whatever we have done, is it according to the requirement or is there anything that we need to change? Now, let us understand a spiral model. A spiral model is a risk-driven software development process model. So the focus of this spiral model is that it takes care of risk. So risk handling is involved in a spiral model. Now, a spiral model is a combination of waterfall model and iterative model. So at this point, we already know what is waterfall model and what is iterative model. So it is just the combination of both these models. So few things I would like to highlight about a spiral. So I am opening my notepad and few points I would like to write for this spiral. Suppose if there is a project in which requirement is not clear. So in a spiral model, we first define objective. Now, after defining this objective, we identify risk. Now, what is identifying a risk? That means we want that whatever is the requirement, We develop things accordingly. And we decide priorities also, and we focus on those modules which are used more. So at second stage, we identify the risk. Once the risk is identified, then we develop next version of project, where developers write the code and testers test the functionality of the project. So this is the third approach that is there in the spiral model. Now the last one, once this development is done, then review and plan for next phase starts. So these are the 4 points which are very important for a spiral, where we first define the objective, we identify risk, then we develop next version of project, and then review and plan for next phase starts. So this is a kind of circle which execute in loop like this. So every phase starts from planning and it ends at deployment and acceptance. Now again, if any changes occur or if anything needs to be added, the complete phase is followed. This is called a spiral model. Let us see advantages and disadvantages of this model. This model is very helpful if there is a risk associated with the project, and it is very useful for large project. It is very flexible too, and customer satisfaction is there because time to time we give a prototype to them and we ask their feedback. So customer satisfaction is there in the spiral model. Now let us come to the disadvantage. What are the disadvantages of this model? This model is complex. As you can see here, these are the phases which are associated with the spiral model. Now if suppose first phase, or suppose this complete cycle is completed, then again if any requirement comes, so the whole cycle or the whole phases one has to follow. So this is obviously a complex model. Then it is expensive also, because again and again if we are working for the same loop with the different phases, so it can result in the it can be expensive also. Then too much risk analysis is there. So if suppose there are team where everyone is not very much experienced, and if it is related to the risk analysis, then it is possible that sometimes failure can happen. So too much risk analysis is there. Now as of now we have seen three models: waterfall model, iterative model, and a spiral model. Now let us see another model which is known as V model. V model is also known as early test design. Why its name is early test design? Because in earlier, in these three models that you have seen above, so their testing was not done in starting. But here in V model, when work starts, testers are involved at every phases. You can see the structure of this model also. The structure of this model is in V shape. It starts from business requirement, where we get requirement from the client. So at the time of requirement gathering, the work of testers starts. They understand the requirement, they identify the functionality, they prepare their test cases, they start their work from very early phase, that is business requirement. Now let us focus on the structure of V model. After this business requirement, project specification is there, which says that what are the functionality that we need to develop for this software. Then again here the work of tester is there, like they identify that which functionality they need to test and what can be the possible test cases. So every flow, every scenario they decide. Then system specification. Here the functionality, the modules are highlighted. Then design specification is the phase where developer develop the application by writing the code. They decide that which languages or which software or which hardware they are going to use, and they start working with their code. After writing the code, component testing takes place. This is basically something which is a task of a developer. They take their codes and they start testing their chunks of code. After that, integration testing in small. They join these small chunks of code and they start performing testing on those chunks of code. Then after this integration testing, there comes the work of system testing where end-to-end testing is performed. All the functionalities are tested very well. And then if suppose there are multiple modules, so all the modules are integrated with one another and they form a product at the end. Now, once the software is developed at the end, it is sent to the client and client tests it at their client side. So here takes place the acceptance testing, which is the testing performed by the user or you can say client at their site. So these phases make a V-shaped kind of a structure, and so this is known as V model. V model is highly recommended, and if we compare it with other models that we have learned as of now, we will find that this model is very effective because from the very first phase, testers are involved in the making of the software. So risks which are associated with the project becomes very less because time to time testing takes place, and if any defect, any bug is reported, the developers take action quickly on those reported bugs, and timely delivery is very easy in this model. Now some uh, let us have a look on the advantages and disadvantages of V model. First of all, we will talk for the advantage. So it is very simple. It provides a structured way of doing things. It works well with small projects where requirements are well understood beforehand. So it is recommended for a small project because in a small project the requirements are known to everyone, and if the requirements are clear, so it is very easy to work with V model. Time spent early reduce cost at later stages. Now let us come towards the disadvantage. If the requirement will not be clear, then it will become a problem and communication gap can result in disaster. No working model of software is available until all phases are finished. So if you will look at this structure, if you have started working for a project from here And if you get feedback after going through all these phases, at the end, if you are getting the feedback that there is something that needs to be changed, so it becomes a problem because we will have to again start working from the very scratch. So this is the disadvantage. Difficult to foresee risk which will come in later stages of development. Need crystal clear requirement. So requirements should be crystal clear. Now we will focus on another SDLC model that we have. It is agile. So agile is very popular nowadays, and in most of the organization agile is used. This model is used because the structure or the process of this model is in such a way that it is very easy to work with requirements which are changing very frequently. So let us have a look on the process that is followed in agile model. Suppose if we get requirement. So requirements are divided into multiple iteration like this: iteration 1, iteration 2 and iteration 3. Now, suppose there is a requirement of developing an e-commerce site. And in e-commerce site, suppose there is a section of home page. Then there is a section of payment gateway. Then there is a section of account. So these three are divided into three iterations. And in each iteration, the phases starts from planning, requirement analysis, designing, building, testing, and then this process continues. So, first of all, when the requirement comes, team analyzes that what are the functionalities that they need to develop, and then they write code, then they test it, and then they present it to their client. And frequent communication with the client takes place in agile model. Now if suppose one module is completed, then second module is completed, and the second module will go in iteration 2. Then third module will go in iteration 3. So it is very easy to work with requirement which is changing very frequently and if the project is very large. Few points are written here for agile. Let us have a look on them. In agile, the tasks are divided to time boxes, a small time frames to deliver a specific features for a release. So here you can see that three iterations are written. So every iteration has a time frame. Now one has to complete his or her task under that time frame. We will have a separate session for agile in my coming videos, and I will share the link also in the description box once my session that I am planning to give on agile is ready. So there you can understand and you can see agile in detail. So we will learn all the processes which are involved in agile. But as of now, the thing that is required to know about SDLC model that we will cover in this video. Okay. Now let us see the second point. Iterative approach is taken and working software build is delivered after each iteration. Now suppose I am working for payment gateway in iteration 1. So if the payment gateway is ready, that software is sent to the client for the feedback. So after every iteration, Software is given to the client for their feedback. Each build is incremental in terms of features. The final build holds all the features required by the customer. So when suppose that this e-commerce site that I was talking about becomes ready, so all these functionality will be added in the final software. There is Agile Manifesto Principles. So there are four Agile Manifesto Principles. One is individuals and interactions. So focus is on individual work if you are working in the Agile. So one can communicate and everyone is very important in Agile team. Working software. Working software is produced after every iteration. Customer collaboration. So customers are part of Agile team and time to time meetings takes place. They give their feedback and if any changes are required. So team always Agile team is always ready for those changes. Then responding to change. If suppose there is a change, immediately action is taken and that is implemented in the project. So these are the four Agile Manifesto principles. So what are the advantages of the Agile model? Agile model is very good for large project. And if requirement is flexible, then choosing Agile model will give a very quality software at the end. Now let us see what are the points that are listed here in the slide. This is a very realistic approach to software development. It promotes teamwork and cross-training. Functionality can be developed rapidly and demonstrated. Resource requirements are minimum, suitable for fixed or changing requirements, delivers early partial working solutions, good model for environments that change steadily, minimal rules documentation easily employed, enables concurrent development and delivery within an overall planned context, little or no planning required, easy to manage. So whatever point is written here, we have already seen these points with these image which is given here for Agile model. So I believe the advantages of Agile model will be clear to everyone. Now, what is disadvantage? Disadvantage is that it follows a process in which an agile leader is required. If you don't have agile leader, then it will be very difficult to work in agile model. So, uh, agile leader, agile PM, they should be there if agile methodology is followed in any organization. And it is not suitable for handling complex dependencies and date is also a constraint. Like if suppose you have got a time frame, so you will have to finish your work in that time frame. So rule is very hard and fast. So these are some of the disadvantages of agile methodology. Now we have seen 5 different SDLC models. Now the question is which model we need to select when. So if you know about these models, you easily understand that which model will suit to your project. Like suppose if you are working for a small project where requirement is not changing, then going with the waterfall model is a very good approach. If suppose you are working for a large project and requirements are changing, so going with the agile model is the best thing where you can develop your software according to this particular model. Now, if suppose there is a project in which risk handling is there, so a spiral model is the one which can be your preference. Now, incremental model, suppose if you are getting requirement time to time and those requirements are not changing very much, then you can go with the incremental model. And V model, suppose if you are working for a small project and you don't want to take much risk, so you can go with the V model. So these are some points which will help you at the time of selecting the model. So I hope SDLC models will be clear to everyone. Let us meet in our next video some other topics of manual testing. Thank you.